Welcome to the Wealth Wisdom, where money has history and knowledge becomes power.
Imagine this. Your grandparents worked their entire lives to buy a home, start a small business, and save for retirement. They built a legacy, a financial safety net meant to protect future generations. But what if I told you that legacy has been quietly eroding, year after year, without anyone noticing? No headlines scream, no scandal erupts. Yet, the value of their hard-earned money slowly slips away, like sand through your fingers. This isn't a conspiracy. This is the silent theft of inflation. And today, we're going to uncover how it happens, why it happens, and why most of us remain completely oblivious. To understand how inflation quietly steals wealth, we need to go back hundreds of years. In the earliest days, money wasn't paper. It was gold, silver, and other tangible commodities. Its value was real, measurable, and critically limited. Earn one gold coin a century ago, and that coin could retain its purchasing power for generations, because no one could just create more out of thin air. Fast forward to the 20th century, and everything changes. Governments start moving away from the gold standard. They realize that printing more money can fund wars, build infrastructure, stimulate the economy, all good things. But there's a hidden cost. Inflation is born. Unlike theft or fraud, inflation is subtle. Nobody points a gun at you. Nobody slaps a warning label on your savings account. Instead, your money slowly loses value, while the system appears perfectly legal, perfectly normal. This modern monetary system wasn't the idea of a single person. It evolved through decisions by central bankers, finance ministers, and economists, people who believed controlled inflation could be a tool rather than a threat. But what they didn't anticipate was the long-term generational impact. Let's look at the origins. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the world relied on the gold standard. Paper money was backed by gold reserves, which naturally limited how much currency could exist. But it also meant that during crises, governments were constrained. They couldn't just print more money to bail out failing banks or fund wars. Then came World War I and World War II. Governments faced enormous pressure, and the solution seemed simple: print more money. At first, it was temporary. But temporary solutions have a way of becoming permanent. With every war, every economic crisis, the money supply grew faster than the real economy. And with each expansion, the seeds of generational wealth erosion were planted. Take Weimar Germany in the 1920s. A loaf of bread that cost 1 mark in 1918 cost 200 billion marks by 1923. Families who had saved for decades saw their wealth vanish almost overnight. Their safe savings, inheritance plans, dreams, gone. The lesson is clear. Inflation isn't just rising prices, it erodes trust in money itself. In 1971, President Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard. Suddenly, the dollar became a fiat currency, paper backed by nothing but faith in the government. Overnight, money became infinitely flexible. Need to stimulate the economy? Print more. Need to fund a deficit? Print more. Economists called it a controlled experiment. Politicians called it a solution. But the real effect was hidden. Families who relied on savings accounts, pensions, and fixed-income investments faced a slow, invisible decline in purchasing power. Here's a simple example. Imagine you had $10,000 in a savings account in 1971, earning 5% interest. But inflation averaged 6% per year over the next decade. Your real wealth was shrinking, not growing. Your safe money was quietly being eaten away. Most people didn't notice. Inflation is a slow, incremental thief. Almost polite, until decades later when the difference becomes shocking. Inflation doesn't just erode wealth, it can reach a breaking point that shakes entire societies. In the 1970s, the world experienced stagflation, stagnant growth coupled with skyrocketing prices. Oil shocks caused energy costs to explode. Middle-class families suddenly struggled to afford even the basics. The invisible hand of inflation became a visible crisis. Pensions funded decades earlier were no longer enough. Retirees watched their nest eggs diminish. Parents could no longer pass on the same financial security to their children. And here's the hidden twist. Even when inflation receded, the damage was permanent. The gap between what a family inherited versus what it should have been widened dramatically. Generational wealth had been quietly stolen, not by crime, not by war, but by a system designed to appear neutral. Fast forward to today. Inflation is often dismissed as a normal part of life. Governments target 2 to 3% per year. Central banks adjust interest rates. Economists assure us everything is under control. But here's the reality. Inflation compounds. Even a moderate 3% per year halves your money's purchasing power roughly every 24 years. That means grandparents who saved $100,000 in 1980 left the equivalent of just $50,000 today. Not because they spent recklessly, but because the system slowly devalued their savings. The consequences are shocking. Home ownership rates among younger generations have plummeted. Pension systems are underfunded. Student debt grows while wages stagnate. And yet, outrage is rare. There's no single villain, no headline-grabbing scandal. The theft is quiet, systematic, generational. Economists have tried to fight inflation. High interest rates in the 1980s under Federal Reserve Chair Paul Volcker tamed runaway prices, but at a cost. Unemployment soared, recessions followed, small businesses suffered. Other tools, wage controls, price freezes, monetary policy experiments, had limited success. The truth, inflation cannot be fully fixed without trade-offs. Fight it aggressively, and you risk crushing the economy. Let it persist, and wealth quietly erodes. The system balances short-term growth against long-term value, and the long-term losers are always the savers. Today, inflation is back in the headlines. Sometimes subtle, sometimes shocking. Energy prices fluctuate. Food costs rise. Housing markets soar. Millennials and Gen Z face challenges their grandparents never imagined. High rent-to-income ratios, rising education costs, lower returns on traditional savings. The numbers tell the story. The U.S. dollar has lost over 90% of its value since 1971. Home ownership among young adults is at its lowest in decades. Real wages have stagnated for 40 years while the cost of living climbs. Patterns repeat. Generational wealth isn't just about earning more, it's about preserving value. And when inflation quietly erodes purchasing power over decades, even hard work and disciplined saving isn't enough. So, what can we learn from this slow-moving crisis? 3 key takeaways. First, inflation is a stealthy thief. It doesn't announce itself, yet it can have the value of savings over a generation. Traditional financial thinking, cash, bonds, fixed pensions, is no longer enough. Second, wealth preservation requires strategy, not just saving. Investments that outpace inflation, diversification, and understanding the monetary system are essential to protect generational wealth. Third, history repeats unless we pay attention. Every time society ignores inflation's long-term effects, families suffer. Awareness is the first defense. The invisible hand of inflation will continue its work, quietly shifting wealth from those who save to those who leverage, from one generation to the next. The question isn't if it will happen, it's whether we're aware enough to fight back, to protect what decades of work have earned. History is a mirror. Ignore it, and the cycle continues. Understand it, and we gain the power to protect not just our wealth, but the wealth of generations to come. If this video opened your eyes to the silent power of inflation, share it with someone you care about. Discuss it with your family. And if you want practical strategies to protect your wealth in today's economy, subscribe and turn on notifications. Knowledge is the first step in reclaiming what inflation quietly steals.